Welcome to this ESRA short movie on mixed methods with a focus on inclusive response. My name is Barry Schouten and I'm going to talk to Joost Kappelhof and Leen Sterckx, who have done several projects over the last few years using mixed methods. A strong feature of their projects was that they mix quantitative and qualitative disciplines. In order to strengthen the two disciplines, they used so-called reflexivity sessions that were developed at their own institute, and under the guidance of Suzanne Roggeveen, one of the trainers, Janelle van the Heuvel and myself did a condensed version of such a session. Janelle was the qualitative researcher and I the quantitative researcher. But let's first go to Joost and Leen. Well, welcome to this ESRA movie. I'm at the Netherlands Institute for Social Research with two colleagues, Leen Sterckx, she's a qualitative methodologist in the methodology department, and Joost Kappelhof, head of that same department. So welcome to this interview.
Thank you.
We're going to talk today about mixed methods and in particular with a focus on inclusive surveys. So this is our goal, but of course we're going to talk about mixed methods more generally. And SAP, as we call it in Dutch, has done a lot of work in this area. So that's why I'm very interested to talk to Leen and Joost about this topic. So maybe zooming out just a little bit, can you say something about what you think is mixed methods research?
Well, I think at its most basic form is, of course, the integration of more qualitative approaches to research with more quantitative oriented approaches to research. And I think you can I think people still view it very much as separate things, and then you can mix and match. So you can start with qualitative and then follow up with the quantitative or a survey, for example, and then maybe do a follow-up again with more qualitative research. And there is also, I think, a continuous search on how to integrate the information more than it is now. Because even in this model I just suggested, you still have your quantitative results aimed to generalize to the wider public, and you have your qualitative in-depth interviews, for example, targeted on specific respondents because they reveal really interesting answers which might give you some idea of what's going on behind the scenes a bit more, but then how do you weigh it up and how do you present it in a way that is sort of intuitive to understand and that also gives credence and confidence in the additional insights you get from qualitative research. So I think this combination is a bit, I think, the broader picture and struggle, I think, mixed methods research.
So you're aiming for more synergy, not necessarily that they follow each other, but they supplement each other.
Exactly. Yeah. We really believe that you get the best of both worlds and that this enriches all research if you don't keep these two approaches separate, but try to reap the benefits from both approaches.
Mm-hmm. Why is this important for your institute? Is there a need today more than ever, or why is there mixed methods at SAP?
Well, in our case, I think because we do policy evaluation research, and I think first of all, of course, the society is more diverse than ever, and the issues that people deal with in their daily life and where you want to develop policy for are getting more and more complex. So it's really challenging to really capture in a survey measurement exactly what is the dynamics of this person in their family with respect to how they interpret, for example, the issue of poverty. You can ask about people's economic standards and what they see, what are important dimensions in their life about it, but how to really get a good grasp on how it affects their life, which is also important for policy. You need to have that sort of in-depth view to see, okay, this is how it works. These are causal relations we can see about how a particular policy might be more effective or less effective. So I think that's why there's more and more focus on how you can integrate those type of approaches more and more.
And we notice also that policymakers are looking for well, beyond the numbers and percentages that they, of course, need to base policy on and budgets and whatnot, but they also like to hear more about the experiences or the lived experiences of the people that are affected by policy. And that, of course, then qualitative research can provide a kind of insight into the way people experience certain policy measures.
You mentioned causality, and causality is always a complex topic, at least in quantitative. They're always very cautious saying anything about causality. Could you say that mixing the two will make it easier to look at causal relations to better understand what is causing what, or is that maybe a bit too far?
Well, I think that might be a little bit too far. It does help, I think, in the generation of hypotheses.
Yes,
in that sense.
Exactly.
So, and it gives you more explanatory power to say, okay, I've seen this quantitative results, and I've also seen the real life setting people occupy with respect to whatever topic you're interested in. And I think I can explain why this is. To prove causality or to have it in an experiment is, of course, a whole different ball game. So I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah.
But it does give more credence to the results that you get, and also the explanations that you give. So it does go more towards.
Yes, we either we use qualitative research to generate hypotheses that then you get to test with the quantitative part of the research, or vice versa. You get certain results and you have difficulty putting them into context, and then qualitative research can fill in a bit more of the gaps of why do we find these, why did we get these findings specifically. So yeah, causality is always an issue, whether you whatever approach, of course, in social science, but here, well, you get to color in more aspects of the phenomenon.
Allow for a more in-depth understanding of the results. Yeah.
Do you have an example of a mixed method that you applied at SAP?
Well, yes, I think one of the best examples I can give, that when I really saw the mixed methods approach working, was in research we did a couple of years ago on diversity in the Department of Defense, in the military and civilian workers of the defense department in the Netherlands. And we started out with a survey among all defense personnel about their experiences with their employer, and yes, the standard measures of worker job satisfaction, etc., that kind of thing. And then we found that in the analysis of these results was that on the one hand you have really high job satisfaction among the personnel. It was the best job they ever had, and they were super content with their employer. And on the other hand, they reported rather high numbers of negative experiences with discrimination, with sexual harassment, with all kinds of harassment in the workplace. So we thought that, well, here is something. What's going on here? That you can't have both. And then we followed up with qualitative research, where we selected respondents from the original survey who had reported these discrepancies in their,
and also indicated that they were willing to be reapproached.
Exactly. That's of course in the first place. And then we did in-depth interviews with them, with specifically women, minority workers, and LGBTQ personnel. And we did in-depth research on why this discrepancy between very high levels of job satisfaction on the one hand, and on the other hand, also very high numbers of reported negative experiences.
Yeah. So it may mean if you wouldn't have the both methods, you may have attributed it to social desirability or some other failure in the questionnaire, maybe something like that.
Exactly. Or you end up saying like, yeah, well, if you don't, how do you say that? If you don't go into the exceptions, then you don't find an explanation for why the general population is giving such varied responses. Yeah,
it's a good example. Maybe a bit more about the method itself. So I assume that in the department you have both qualitative and quantitative researchers. You may have maybe needed some time to get the group together to do these kind of methods. So how did that go?
Well, it provides a bit of a challenge, to be honest, because we both and I say we because Joost is very much a quantitative researcher in origin, and I'm a qualitative person. We do have a different kind of logics that we apply in our research, and different and that doesn't always come together very easily. And we often speak different language and don't naturally understand each other. So we put a lot of effort into bringing both worlds closer together. And yeah, I don't know what.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, true. And also, I think just by discussing the topic or the issue you don't understand, sometimes you actually find out, actually, we just have a different name for it. I seem to recall there's in this one of the handbooks of written by Groves in '89. He makes, I think he compares like people from econometrics, statistics, and I think methodology, or anyway, like three different groups, and he sort of takes the same word and then he says, okay, this is the definition in this context, or this context, and the other way around. I think in case of people with a qualitative and a quantitative background, that is even more enlarged in terms of how they look at design, how they interpret concepts that we think are the same concepts, or we use the same words, but we have a different meaning. And sometimes the other way around, we use different words, but we're talking about the same thing.
Exactly, but you have to have an open mind to that fact that there is a lot more common ground than we tend to think, and I think there is also a bit of a generation gap in that respect. That I noticed that the younger researchers here at the institute are more open to that kind of flexibility in approaches and methodology, and that you see that like the
people have been working long in one particular discipline, find it more challenging.
Exactly. Then yes.
Does it converge? So let's say you do this for a number of years, you have a team, people start to know each other. Does it open their minds more than, let's say, when you would start?
Well, and of course it is a challenge. And when we started, so our institute, the Government Research Institute, has like a multi-annual research program. And in the previous research program, we envisioned to do more qualitative research. So we hired more qualitatively schooled researchers. And especially in the beginning, it was quite challenging to get people to talk and have a discussion, also because it's also a very personal thing for people at some point as well. They say, I've been doing research about topic X for many years. Now this person comes and does it. And what does that mean? That I did do it wrong? No, you didn't do it wrong. You did it very well. That's not the point. But it's just enriched. The topic is enriching. We want to have more in-depth knowledge. So to frame that as a discussion, that people are open to each other's arguments and try to make it better is a continuous challenge.
And to be honest, that there is a lot of prejudice, vice versa, from one approach to the other. And so you have to, well,
you have to build a rapport.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that is a good bridge to, because I know there are ways of doing this. You know, I know you've mentioned what I think is called reflexivity, if I could pronounce it correctly.
Yes.
This could be is more general than mixed methods, but then it definitely could be used. Is that something that you use in your office?
Yes, that is something we developed basically to get to the forefront the sort of unspoken assumptions you have about a topic, or the interpretation you might give to results you observe, or what you think is basically your ideal vision of how it should be. And these things, or your scientific discipline background and how that shapes your thinking about topics. And to have a discussion and in an open situation where you think, regarding this topic, what assumptions do I have? What is right? What is wrong? What do I expect? Why do I want to ask these particular items on this topic and not anything else? What is behind my own thinking?
Well, let me pause the interview here and move to the reflexivity session. This will be led by Suzanne Roggeveen. She is a former methodologist at the Netherlands Institute for Social Research, and she will be the facilitator.
Let me start with the purpose of the reflexivity sessions. Maria Loetje-Sijpelhof, Maria Vliek, Claudia Hartman, Stijn de Vos, and I developed these sessions at the Netherlands Institute for Social Research. And in these sessions, we spoke about how dynamic and contextual factors shape the way researchers view the world and themselves, and how these worldviews and identities influence their research. This is what is often called positionality. Central to this concept is how the power positions of researchers influence the design of the research and the relations between them and their respondents. We used a reflexive stance to discuss several aspects of various positionalities within the teams in regard to a research proposal, and that is what in this case is meant by reflexivity. The aim of these sessions was that we could use the interdisciplinary knowledge of the researchers even more profoundly than we already did, prevent bias, and make power dynamics and research choices in research explicit. To give you an example, because this is a bit abstract, we sometimes noticed that there was more diverse theoretical knowledge in the teams than was used in a certain research proposal. In the sessions, we discussed if we could include this knowledge in the proposal, or we discussed what the implications were of researchers, for example, coming from privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, studying people that might have experienced less privileges in their lives. We noticed that it is sometimes hard to talk about these kind of issues in interdisciplinary mixed methods teams, since they easily get lost in translation. A mathematician is vastly differently trained than an anthropologist or a historian. So an additional advantage of these sessions is that it is easier to translate your point of view to people with different knowledge and opinions. However, the concepts of reflexivity and positionality are rather broad, general, and vague. And in the literature, there are some studies that show how to apply them in teams. There is, for example, an interesting article by Kappinga and Huizinga, and I think that the Erasmus University now also developed some exercises. but most studies focus on how to reflect on your research in an individual setting, or these articles are very abstract and theoretical. While in mixed methods teams, you need practical tools to have these kind of discussions. I will show you how we did that. We decided to develop these practical exercises that researchers can perform during a team meeting. We piloted our first exercises in 3 teams who conducted a qualitative, a quantitative, and a mixed methods project. And we soon noticed that our exercises were suitable for the qualitative researchers, but were not as inclusive to the quantitative researchers. Therefore, with the help of Joost Kappelhof, who is also in this movie, and Palette Flora, we adjusted them, and now they are quite inclusive for a range of disciplines and methodologies. At the Netherlands Institute for Social Research, we implemented these sessions in all of the teams and tailor-made some of the exercises for different goals, like challenges in policy research. We started with a research proposal as a starting point for the discussion, and always used an independent moderator to create a safe atmosphere, because if you have someone from your team and that person is also working on the proposal, it's a bit weird if you are doing the moderation. And these sessions usually last about 2 hours. That might sound like a lot, but we also really gained some time in the research process because people understood each other better, and we were able to be more explicit about choices made during the research. So that is, in a really short time, a bit about sessions. But now comes the fun part. I'm going to show at least a little bit how they work. We can only conduct 1 or 2 of the exercises, and usually we would perform this with at least 4 people. But I think it will give the viewer an idea of how they work. They're also the most safe exercises. They're used as an introduction to get to know each other and to prevent bias in theory and methodology. The ones about philosophy of science and personal positionality can be a bit more sensitive and therefore would require a different setting. So, Barry and Janelle, I asked you to send me a research proposal, and of course I've read it, but I thought maybe you could briefly tell me a bit about the proposal, and then we start with the theoretical exercise.
Actually, very topical project. Janelle is working on this. I've been involved also for some time. We have the feeling that nowadays it's hard for us to get young adults in our surveys. And our goal is to find out how we can do better in that perspective. Maybe move away from the old traditional recruitment materials like letters or going to the door, to other kinds of communications or reaching out options. But we don't really know how to start. So we think we need qualitative and quantitative approaches in this. So I think, yeah, that's something we have to explore in the coming years. And a session like this might at least help us a little bit.
I think so. I think these sessions are really good for mixed methods purposes. So we will see if they actually work in practice. Let me see if I can get to the next slide. Yeah. So this is the first exercise. In the beginning, these exercises can feel a bit strange or uncomfortable, but I promise that during the second exercise, it will feel completely normal. So for this first exercise, we will discuss what you studied, what kind of theory you often use, what you like about the theory you frequently use, what kind of pitfalls you encounter, and how relevant theory is to your current research proposal. So you had a little time to think about it. So maybe, Barry, can you start telling me what did you study?
I'm a mathematician. In fact, I'm even an engineer. I did technical mathematics, and after that, I did a PhD in mathematical statistics. So I think I was raised very much in the area of modeling and trying to build models to understand, for example, a phenomenon like this.
Yes.
But it's a long time ago since I was a student. So
Yeah.
in the meantime, I've learned quite a lot more, but I'm not sure if you want to hear about that too. But,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, so the issue the topic that we are talking about, so the whole non-response issue, there are a number of bigger theories. One is called leverage saliency. So you would try to figure out what is the important aspect of this survey for a particular person and try to make that salient. So the levers and the saliency, that's one. It's a big theory that I guess also is important even in modeling. So the kind of covariates that you would look for.
Yeah.
And another thing that I was thinking of is what's sometimes called tailor design. So you would not do one size fits all, but you would sort of tailor. And again, this is, you could look at it from a quantitative perspective as finding the right covariates in the model.
Okay.
Maybe that's as far as I can say
Yeah.
more.
Thank you. Yeah, now, can you also tell me a little bit about what you studied and maybe also a little bit about what you did after that?
Yes, of course. So I actually started my academic career as a lab technician. However, I continued into international public health, which was actually aimed to try to translate the quantitative world into fields where policy is made, for instance. And during the study, we actually focused a lot on frameworks and theories that try to understand the human behavior. And I feel that I actually often tend to rely a lot on these theories and still use them quite a lot to try to understand why certain, for instance, youngsters in this case, actually behave the way that they do. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Can you give me one more example, maybe, about what you meant with the last thing about human behavior?
So, for instance, if we try to understand why people are not responding on to our surveys or are not interested at all. If you, for instance, look at the social exchange theory or even many other theories, it's actually makes sense quite a lot. And I think even in a lot of experiments, we try to actually take a component of this framework to see what effect it has on, for instance, response rate or login rates.
Okay, thank you. And maybe, Barry, can you tell me something that you really like about the theories you often use and why they are important to also maybe this proposal that you wrote? Yeah.
Yeah, I can try. Actually, when I started working in this area, I've been working in non-response for quite a long time, decades. And we started out that, we work at Statistics Netherlands. Statistics Netherlands is a relatively rich source of auxiliary data. We can link quite a bit of information and see what kind of people are in the survey, what people are not. But these models are very, very poor, to be honest. If we would look at the performance of these models, they tend to be very weak. We don't really understand it very well. So in time, I started to move a little bit more to what the softer covariates, as you may call them. And I think in these kind of theories like leverage salience theory, social exchange theory is also, of course, one of them. it's much more into the psychology of the respondent, not so much in whether you are young or old or have a lot of money or whatever it is. But these kind of things of course, it's hard for us to grasp through factual stuff. And so I think in time we've tried to start looking more into what then should we measure, what then should we find that helps us understand. So it's still a bit of a quantitative perspective, but without the right information, you could say.
Yeah, so you also already mentioned some of the pitfalls or the maybe the blind spots in these kind of theories. How is that for you, Janelle? How's that the theories you use?
Well, my current job, we try to, of course, actually talk to the people that we try to analyze, just to enrich the data. And even Barry mentioned sometimes auxiliary variables they lack, and we actually require a bit more of the why. And in a conversation, it often the answer arises. So, but of course, the time that you have and and also how many people you can actually speak to, it of course has its limitations. So yeah, of course, it does has a lot of I see a lot of advantages, but also it's pitfalls that you can't speak to everybody. And also, if you look a bit into what they actually say or what opinion they have, but of course, it is not uniform. Everybody has another opinion. So how do you, in the end, actually make sense of it? It's often quite hard to do.
Yeah, that's indeed quite difficult sometimes. And if you're like looking at your proposal and you are hearing each other's background now, you of course know each other a little bit. But are there things that you think like, oh, actually this is my background and we didn't do anything with it in this proposal? Is there something still lacking in the proposal, you think?
I always look at things we can change, parameters that can change, thresholds that can be changed. So sort of things that you can test, and you can contrast with each other. My fear could be that we do this, but that we still have a lot of questions at the end, because we have only seen some of these parameters or contrasts. Not saying that I think it's very not important. I think it's actually very important to do this, but I could be afraid that we need a lot of time to learn.
So something I worry about is that, of course, maybe we're a bit too enthusiastic to call it youngsters, because of course they're so diverse, and maybe it's also quite logical that models can't really make sense of it. But however, we still want a somehow efficient way to monitor them, and as Barry had mentioned, to test certain aspects or experiments that don't really require a very large intervention or a completely new method of gathering our data.
So after this, we continued discussing this for around 5 minutes. Susanna asked a few more questions, but I guess you get the picture. Let us go on to the second exercise that Susanna has prepared.
So this is more of a methodological exercise. I saw that you, in your proposal, you proposed a few methods. I saw starting with a survey and then focus group. But I would like to challenge you a little bit to think about two different methods you could use in regard to this proposal. You can write them down. I'll give you a few minutes and describe why they might also be fitting. And methods can be both fieldwork methods as well as analytic methods in this exercise.
And I want to start off that it's a really hard question.
Yeah, definitely.
It really made me realize that I rely on the methods that I use day to day. So it was quite hard to think outside of the box. But one method I came up with was a different type of gathering our data. So of course, as Statistics Netherlands, we send out a lot of surveys. But maybe, well, I can imagine that surveys are not that attractive, maybe for youngsters. So maybe by a type like a citizen science kind of approach, it might be attractive. That it is another and an active way of contributing to this, and it might be worthwhile to try to well, investigate if it might work. But I don't really see how we should do it, but it might work.
Well, let me go back to my more quantitative roots. One option that I would see is we go all the way. So rather than linking just a little bit of information, we go back. We also link the information about the parents, about the lives of these parents. You know, we have actually some historical information also about how long you have been employed and all that. So the family situation, you could say, the neighborhood, all out, everything we've got. That I can imagine maybe we can get a bit further. And the other option that I thought of is, you know, it's not that young people never are in surveys. Of course, they are in our surveys, and they are more in some surveys than they are in others. So maybe we could also look at all of the things we are doing, where they show up more or maybe not so often, and maybe deduce from that a bit about what they like, what they're interested in.
If you're going forward with this proposal, how do you think that you could like honor both of these perspectives in the proposal, or like make the most of the different perspectives? Do you have an idea about that?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think using qualitative research does make researching it a bit more efficient, but I want to alter my words. Maybe, of course, it still needs to be data-driven. You need to have like a clue through data on what subjects we're going to look into, what questions we need to ask, for instance, the youngsters. Not to be completely drowned in this information, but just to make it a bit more targeted. So I do, of course, see the advantages of also using quantitative research. But I think it does make sense to maybe even tailor the way that we do qualitative research.
And what do you mean with tailor?
So for instance, if we see that that a certain variable, for instance, where they live, influences the response rate or the non-response, we might want to tailor our questions that we actually ask people on what the living situation, how it influences their day, and how it influences or affects why they respond or not respond. So you can ask them a bunch of questions, but of course you need to see or maybe tailor which questions you want to answer to actually ask them.
Yeah, good point. Thanks. Barry.
Well, I think I would have answered this question when I was younger, a bit differently, but you know, even if we would be able to come up with let's say models that sort of better predict or explain why certain events happen, these tend to be information that we cannot change. We cannot change someone's age. We cannot change whether you lose a job or not. That's of course we cannot. So I actually think if we really want to react to events or the life situation that is important, we have to go to the psychology of these persons, to the softer information, to the theory, why they feel and why they do what they do. And that's all qualitative in my perspective. We can never get a grip of this without knowing what's going on in their heads, I guess. So I think the two together, maybe one could say, well, we have to look a little bit more into these kind of young people because we don't see them so much. And then the other theory would say, okay, we maybe have an idea why and how you can change that. I hope that this fusion is possible.
I was also kind of hinting with my previous question at how would you do this in a mixed methods and maybe also interdisciplinary team, and how do you do this in practice? Because sometimes we noticed in our groups that, for example, the quantitative perspective got a little bit more dominant than the qualitative in the study. Well, for the research question, it would be better if they had were a bit more equal, or vice versa. And this didn't always happen on purpose, but sometimes it just happens in the research process that you start with your survey and you think like, oh wow, oh, interesting things are coming out of this study, and then there's not that much time anymore for the qualitative part. Or you're doing a mixed method study, but most of the researchers have a qualitative background. Or so I was wondering if you have an idea how to handle these kind of things in your team.
So we talked for 10 more minutes about how we could mix the disciplines in practice. If you're really interested, send Janelle or me an email, but I think it's more interesting to hear what Leen and Joost have to say and how they did this in their daily practice.
Yes, so we organize these reflexivity and positionalities exercises that we do at the start of a research project, where you systematically think about your how to say all these things that Joost just mentioned, but specifically about your own positionality as a researcher as well, and how does this come into research, and how if you do this as a team, then you get a lot of insight in each other's positions and way of thinking about the topic, and then you can come closer together. I think that maybe an approach that is a bit more common in qualitative research, that we put a lot of effort on reflexivity and positionality, and that we actually try to socialize our quantitative colleagues into adopting these exercises to all research here at the Institute. Yeah.
And then you also find interesting parallels. I think that sort of are similar, only in a different context. For example, I've had a long history in the European Social Survey, cross-national research and cross-cultural topics. That really is sort of hits at some of these same issues. You make implicit assumptions how things are, and they are not the same. And to really make it explicit about the concept and what falls under the concept. Is it the same? Are we all viewing this the same? Do we interpret these results? I think that sort of you have elements of this whole discussion hitting other areas of survey research as well, I think.
let's be a bit more specific. So I mentioned inclusive surveys. We all know that response rates have been declining. It's a topic that comes up all the time. There are even some that would think that some populations are becoming out of reach in the larger scale general population studies. Definitely true that quantitative methods to study this is hard. You use basically the same tool that is actually causing the issue. So qualitative methods seem key. I know you have been doing quite a bit of this over the last few years. What according to you is actually inclusive response?
There are certain groups of respondents quite often in a minority position in society that do not participate in the same way as do the average inhabitant of the Netherlands, is to say. And also that we get reports of people not recognizing themselves and their situation in our research results and in our reports. So we're never satisfied with the fact that our ambition is to give an insight into the lives and the experiences of the entire population. And if you know that you're systematically missing certain perspectives, that we are not content about that. So we started a methodological research project into what are the origins of this gap in readiness to participate, and then we found out that apart from, of course, the things that we already know and work a lot about on, for instance, doing more face-to-face interviews instead of online or written interviews.
I think basically the more the potential respondent-centered view on things. And that is not only in the approach strategy, as Leen was suggesting, translating if it's needed, people are maybe functionally literate, have a face-to-face discussion, etc., to make it in that way more inclusive and more in accordance to their social reality, but also the topic itself. Because, and especially when you come from a government research institute, your frame is, of course, policy evaluation, how it's viewed from the government, but it doesn't necessarily match very well with how the people that you want the information from actually view the problem. It doesn't really correspond often to their social context.
The most simple example is this, that policy usually starts with the identification of a certain a problem, or at least a situation that's perceived as problematic, or a population that is perceived as problematic or having problems or causing problems or whatever. So our research questions that want to inform these policies are also problem-based. So we problematize a certain situation. And of course, if you approach people wanting to talk about the way they are a problem to society, or they have problems in society, that's not a very positive way, and probably doesn't correspond to the way they see themselves. So if you think about the way you approach people, the questions you ask, the topics you agendize in your research, then and think about the larger context in which are you problematizing people or not, or seeing things from their perspective. That is a big step forward towards inclusive research. And I think a very big issue is trust. Trust in the researcher, trust in the government, in the institutions, and not only a rapport between respondent and interviewer, but also trust in our institute, for instance, as an agent which operates pretty close to the government, that the issue of trust in research is a very big one, especially among minority populations.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that, of course, that the qualitative research and methodological research provides a lot of very valuable insights that are sometimes more easy to apply in more quantitative methods, and sometimes they're really difficult to, that you can take notice of them, but it's still a challenge to implement them. But it does shape, when I go back to survey and how the whole survey life cycle, it does shape, if you do it consistently in each step of the survey life cycle, does sharpen your thinking, even towards the end. So the example Leen was mentioning before, that if you do analysis, a lot of people are used to making comparisons between groups. But if you do a comparison between a majority and a minority group, implicitly you write about a systematic difference. So you sort of reinforce an idea that nobody's really helped with. Whereas you can also say, okay, how can I write it differently? I can make a group as a whole and then set the other two groups compared to that. And then you get a completely different way of framing what you're researching, and also you're taking away of this sort of implicit bias of what is better and not good. So these sort of things help also in breaking the sort of negative feedback loop. Some of these, specifically people in the margins that are maybe more reluctant to participate, but they can of course be very influential in what is the general, what does a policy work, and why do that they don't participate, to sort of break that feedback loop there, because they feel more nice.
I hear you say a few things. Is it a matter of different type of communication, more differentiation, more targeting, more, let's say, time to see how people like to sort of start in all this? What is the key success in this? Where
the key issue is that you challenge yourself to rethink a lot of the categories, the terminology, your way of thinking, your biases, your assumptions, at every stage of the research projects and in all aspects of the design, that you challenge yourself to rethink in the light of the fact that you're researching a certain population, and that you are more aware when you do that with, again, your own positionality, as generally, how do you say that? We're very highly educated people with stable jobs, and most of us are a non-immigrant background, white, etc. And we do research on, and we document the lives of people who are in a very different social position, and do not just go about, or do not just start off, because this is a discussion point that I frequently have with colleagues, like, oh, but this is a validated instrument to measure this or this concept. But no, just go back to the beginning. Why do we put it in these terms? Why do we talk about it this way? And can we introduce more of the perspective of the people we are talking about into the entire methodology of the research?
For example, when you try to measure concepts about religion, that is usually shaped by secular views on what is the function of religion. And then when you talk to persons who are religious, they have a completely different mindset and a different view on it. And if you then write about the results of a survey conducted among people, that they won't recognize themselves in that. And
exactly. The entire research will speak of your implicit secular bias, that you think that being religious in the first place is a little backward or whatever, and maybe you don't set out to imply this, but it's inherent in the instrument that you use, and just becoming aware of these mechanisms, I think is a step forward to making more inclusive research practices.
The recognition as well that, of course, societies are becoming more and more diverse. So it does take more.
Well, it seems very plausible, and what I also hear from what you're saying is that we need more time to prepare. We need more time to do this, and of course, time is also a bit of money. There also sounds like there's a bit more personal, sort of more of a human touch in this. So can you translate some of these studies? Let's say you do one study for a particular topic, and then now another study comes. Can it borrow from the other sort of to gain time a little bit, or is it every study is a different one?
No, I don't think if you have like a general social surveys and that they usually contain particular topics relevant for governments to make new policy or to evaluate the effectiveness, or I think as soon as some of these concepts are developed, for example, in collaboration with different minority groups, so the experience of the person themselves are more included in the design, then as soon as you have a revised instrument, I think you can use it, of course, for multiple rounds. But I do think you have to incorporate in your system, yet you have to do this more frequently than maybe people are used to when they think it's been validated once in the 80s in country X. So therefore, we can use it in country I. And that's just not true. So this sort of reflects of making sure that you...
If there are many, well, let's say there are multiple minority groups or interest groups, or how you may call them, in one particular study, would that then mean you would try to address them individually, differentiate? Or...
Oh, that's the challenge between, I guess, the not only the cost and timeliness, but also the desire to generalize and not deviate too much. So that makes it more difficult to make comparisons. And that's also the struggle we're in all the time.
Yes.
And it's always to continue. It's easy when you have a survey that is specifically focused to, let's say, a minority group X, because then you can go all in. But yeah, if it's a general survey, it's about, okay, are there specific topics that I assume that are for a minority group are disproportionately different in a way that it does affect our estimates? And I think that's sort of the thinking you should have.
And I think
yes, decision.
It's more about what can work in all circumstances is to say, well, I don't have as of yet found the one response to make all research inclusive to all groups that might feel excluded. But I think there is a lot of spillover between the groups because, like I said, the trust issue and issues with positionality and bias that we automatically have from everybody has biases stemming from the position they take up in society, and so just the practice or this of systematically reflecting on that position and on how that translates into your research, I think is key. I think it works for all categories because, what I mentioned, that trust in research, trust in that people have your best interest at heart when they conduct research, which I think is a big motivator for most of us, is an issue not only for religious people or people from migrant background, but for all kinds of minority position respondents in.
One, I think, and that is, I think, one of the most critical points. And I think, and then there are actually, so there is low-hanging fruit you can do as a researcher as well to train yourself on this. I think a great example Leen often uses is, okay, if you have a question where you think this might actually be confrontational or people might not like it, translate it to your own situation and see if you're offended by it. these sort of things make you more aware of, oh wait, I'm actually questioning framing already in my design in a way that sort of marginalizes people or reinforces a sort of idea that is just not.
For instance, yeah, the best example I think is we tend to, in order to measure a kind of the quality of a neighborhood, of social fabric in a neighborhood, we ask things like how do you see the rising number of people of migrant background settling in your neighborhood? Is this, you think this is a positive thing or a negative thing, and then a scale in between, and you can indicate like, I feel that this impacts negatively my quality of living in this neighborhood. If you reframe the question like what does the level of white people in your neighborhood do with your satisfaction of living there? And you say like, but that's a weird question. Why do we then?
What do you think the people that, you know, that sort of thing?
If you think that's a weird question, imagine what this does to to the respondent of minority background who sees this questionnaire and thinks like, they're problematizing me for who I am, and then you're on the wrong track.
It's a very good example. But you know, maybe you mentioned a few times trust in who was doing the survey. Essentially, is that true? Do you think there's a new minority group that somehow we need to sort of gain again their trust?
Yes, I definitely think that, and actually that's the group that I'm targeting with the next step in this methodological research, is people that in all our surveys indicate that they have very low trust in all kinds of institutions, including sometimes our researchers as an institution, or universities or academia or whatever, but not always. It's not always the same group. So, and I think again that we, in the way we talk about people with these low trust issues in public debate, in political debate, but also I think maybe in our questionnaires and the categories that we use, and how we write about them, what labels we give them, we are not trustworthy in the sense, and our way of writing and talking about them does not correspond to their own vision of themselves. And then you've got the same problems with all these groups, that they feel we don't have their best interests at heart.
Yeah. And in this discussion now, it's easy because everybody understands this, but this group is not homogeneous.
No, exactly.
And it's not across the board, and it's not always. And I think that sort of also is a key to opening up how you can reach people that might have a tendency sometimes to be of lower trust, or need something else to participate again. Because it's not, I think the lack of responsivity towards the survey request is an indicator of something wider, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that these methods can translate to cross-country? You know, these are debates that are ongoing in many countries right now. So if you would, let's say, have a certain strategy to do this, would that be transferable, let's say, to neighboring countries or other countries in Europe?
I think not the specific outcome of the process, like we cater for these specific groups, for instance. These probably don't translate to another country, but the practice of being more reflexive about your research and thinking about the ways you implicitly exclude certain categories of people from, the standards. That the practice of thinking about it and trying to remedy it, that I think can be applied all across the world.
And the insight that it's just not only the sort of more general approach, because that's for the majority works, not only a design phase, but also in the later stages. People tend to think, okay, we've done well in the design phase, so we implement it and then everything is fine. But if you then go back to reinforcing old ideas, because you still make distinctions between these groups, whereas there might not be a distinction. And
yeah, there may very well be an interaction with cultural differences too, right? It's qualitative, quantitative, but they're probably colored as well, also by the difference in countries. So does it make sense to do reflexivity sessions across countries to also sort of tease out these kind of differences? Would that make sense?
Maybe, but then again, I think, and our colleague Suzanne can explain that more. It's not easy. It's not easily done. The reflexivity exercises in themselves, you need a certain base of trust among the people participating as well. So, and it takes a lot of work to set up a situation in which everybody feels secure enough to share, because this goes pretty deep, to share their own biases, their own belief systems. Exactly. So I think it's doable. Yes, of course, especially if you have a common goal to make beautiful research. But it takes a lot of effort into creating a secure environment to be able to do this kind of exchange.
Thanks a lot. I really learned a lot from your explanations on mixed methods, and I'm also very curious where it will go. So I would definitely like to invite you next ESRA, which is in 27. Please report about your studies, because I think it's one of the hot topics right now worldwide. So thanks a lot for your time and effort. And of course, I hope to see you at ESRA.
Thank you for inviting us.
Well, we've come to the end of this ESRA short movie, and normally I end with saying that I learned a lot, but in this case I would like to say I really, really learned a lot. I also like to thank Suzanne Roggeveen, who guided us through a reflexivity session, and I would recommend you to contact her to see what these sessions are about and perhaps whether they can help you as well. But not to forget, there are more short movies. Please go to www.europeansurveyresearch.org to see them.